Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They clothed him in purple robe and went up to him again and again, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they slapped him in the face. Once more Pilate came out and said to the Jews gathered there, "Look, I'm bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him." And when Jesus came out, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." And as soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify, crucify." But Pilate answered, "You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him." The Jewish leaders insisted, "We have a law, and according to that law he must die, because he claimed to be the Son of God." And when Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid, and he went back inside the palace. "Where do you come from?" he asked Jesus. But Jesus gave him no answer. "Do you refuse to speak to me?" Pilate said. "Don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free. But the Jewish leaders kept shouting, "If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar." And when Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judge's seat at a place known as the Stone Pavement, which in Aramaic is Gabbatha. It was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about noon. "Here is your king," Pilate said to the Jews. But they shouted, take him away, crucify him." "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar," the chief priests answered. Finally, Pilate handed him over to be crucified. So the soldiers took charge of Jesus. Carrying his cross, he went out to the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on each side, and Jesus in the middle. Every year on this day, Good Friday, we repeat the story of Jesus' trial and crucifixion. We do this not because we don't remember it, or at least for most of us, that is not the case. Part of it is to make sure we get the story straight, so we rehearse the details. But mostly I think the reason we tell this story year after year is so that we may find ourselves in it. And when that happens, it can be disturbing. Barbara Brown Taylor says the story of Good Friday is like a mirror. She remembers being at a retreat once where the leader asked them to think of someone who represented Christ in their lives. When it came time to share the answers, one woman stood up and said, "I had to think hard about that one. I kept thinking, who is it who told me the truth about myself so clearly that I wanted to kill him for it?" According to John, Jesus died because he told the truth to everyone he met. He was the truth, a perfect mirror in which people saw themselves in God's own light. He is the light of the world. In his presence, people either fall down to worship him or do everything they can to extinguish his light because they can't stand it. When you listen to this familiar story, who is it that you identify with? To whom do you give your empathy on Good Friday? Where do you find yourself within the passion of Christ? Is it Judas? None of us would have done what Judas did, would we? Betrayed Jesus? Probably not. Unless perhaps we believed that Jesus was a political Messiah who was going to lead us in a revolt against an oppressive Roman regime, and all he needed to start the fires of insurrection was for someone to throw out a little gasoline and light a match. Have you ever pushed someone into something? But if you were honest, it was really more about what you wanted to happen, what your expectations were, your own impatience to have them do what you wanted them to do. None of us would have done what Peter did, would we? Promise to follow Jesus come hell or high water, only to deny him at the first opportunity. Probably not. But then again, who knows what we would do under those same circumstances? Have you ever gotten really quiet when you realize if you said what you were thinking, it wouldn't go over well? None of us would have done what Caiaphas did, would we? Make the claim that it is better for one person to die than for many? Probably not. Except, have you ever been guilty of political expediency, chosen the less of two evils? None of us would have done what Pilate did, would we? Shuttled back and forth between Jesus and his accusers, hoping that an easy way out would present itself? Probably not. And yet, how many times have I listened long past the moment when I knew what to do, just because the right thing was not the easy thing? And maybe I was hoping something else would come up. You might almost feel sorry for Pilate in this story. He clearly wants to spare Jesus. But what can you do when the people have so clearly spoken? None of us would have done what the chief priests did, would we? Shout out, crucify him, and we have no king but Caesar. Probably not. But then again, have you ever been swept away with the crowd, or ever gotten caught up in a kind of mob mentality? Have you ever helped someone get removed or reassigned because he or she was making life difficult for you? None of us would have done what the soldiers did, would we? Flogged Jesus, put a crown of thorns on his head. None of us would have nailed him to a cross or gambled for his clothes or pierced his side, would we? Probably not. But good soldiers do what they are told every day, don't they? And we usually mean that as a compliment. None of us would have done what Mary did, would we? Stood there at the foot of the cross and watched a son's life give way, risked our own lives standing there with him. Probably not. But then again, maybe some of you would have. In fact, I have known some of you too. I have seen you watch, keep vigil as a loved one drew her last breath. I have seen some of you stay by the bedside in the last hour. I have seen some of you stand by someone when it got difficult. I have seen you take a risk in order to stand with a person that you loved. So maybe I can see you doing what Mary did. Maybe this is where we need to enter the Good Friday story this year. Maybe this is where we need to take our stand. Not betraying Jesus, not denying him or judging him, not condemning him or rejecting him, not mocking him or killing him, but standing there at the foot of the cross with others who love him, putting our arms around each other for comfort and strength, so that later when they ask, "What happened? Were you there?" we can say, "Yes, we were standing at the foot of the cross."
Jesus is here with his arms open wide. You can see him with your heart if you stop looking with your eyes. He left it up to you. He's done all he can. Is there any way you could say no to this man? How could you look in his tear-stained eyes, knowing it's you he's thinking of? Could you tell him